Welcome to another unit unboxing for Age of Wonders Planetfall. This is the Dvar Bulwark unit. So the Bulwark is a relatively expensive but powerful Tier 2 heavy mechanical skirmishing unit. Um, Although it's pretty powerful as far as damage output, it's definitely vulnerable in a couple of different ways to some pretty straightforward counterplays. First of all, let's just go through it. So it's naturally psionic resistant as a mechanical unit. Also stagger resistant as a heavy unit, which is nice. But it is, on the flip side, or it gets stagger resistance as part of one of its passives, but it's heavy as well. On the flip side, though, it's naturally weak to arc damage, which is pretty common that you run into sources of arc damage. So it's got a couple of pretty strong abilities, but the key to this one is using it out of danger when appropriate and getting it to apply the most damage you can when it's appropriate to kind of be more offensive. So let's review the skills. So autocannons is kind of the basic skill here. So we get 12 kinetic damage. It's 80% accurate, 7 hex range, repeating, and affected by line of sight. So you'll notice this is slightly reduced accuracy. Most ranged attacks in this kind of tier are 90% accurate. I think it's kind of more of a bit of a game balance choice to go with the 80% accurate for this ability here. But regardless, it's still kind of a straightforward ability that just can churn out a ton of damage if you're able to get that repeating off of it. Also, kind of an interesting sort of meta note here. So the repeating damage can be in skills can be kind of hard to find for this faction. So depending on what other army composition choices you're making, you kind of want to keep that in mind if you're going to be using these guys for when it comes time to choose offensive weapon mods. You know, having attacks that are applying multiple times in some cases works a little bit fundamentally differently than the single action attacks, which you'll find on some more common Dvar units. So anyways, but that's the autocannon skill. Let's move on here. So the second skill is concussive volley. It's 100% accurate, 7 hex range. It doesn't do any damage, but it has a pretty strong chance to apply the concussion debuff to a single target. So concussion basically makes the target unable to move or use abilities. It takes all the action points away from the target. This concussive volley is on a 2-turn cooldown. So this is a great skill, obviously. It's nice to use as a single action ability because you can kind of mix it in with how you're moving this unit around on the tactical map. Some cases it'll be more valuable to disable a unit than it would be to deal a little bit of damage, and then dealing more damage on your next turn with this unit when we've got a repeating option on our autocannons ability. But so obviously you want to prioritize, vulnerable or high priority targets, making them vulnerable for follow-up turns and other units to take advantage of them. A useful ability for sure. Moving on to what isn't a active ability, but which is a very important passive that this unit has, is the Agile Overwatch, which basically how this functionally works is whenever you enter Overwatch, normally you'd only have opportunities to make Overwatch attacks based on how many action points you have left when you go into the Overwatch mode. So here, it's treated like you always have 3 action points remaining, even if you already did your movement and only had 1 action point remaining by the time you go to Overwatch. So it's a very useful ability that really turns this unit from kind of a straightforward bit of a glass cannon-y type unit to more of a flexible mid-tier, mid-battlefield unit that can control points of the map with really effective positioning and movement and covering with a field of fire here with this Overwatch ability. So you kind of you'll get a sense of how to sort of mix these guys in with your trenches and trencher units or other units that are advancing sort of straight towards the enemy. Once you kind of get the hang of it, you see there is a definite use for this unit, I think, at least in my opinion. But yeah, in summary, the Agile Overwatch is what turns this unit into a very useful unit on the battlefield versus the relatively straightforward autocannon and concussive volley active skills. So for progression, it's useful. It's nothing exciting, obviously, but we get health and accuracy. Health makes this unit more survivable, which it could certainly use a decent bit of. It's kind of a bit of a vulnerable unit. It's less resilient than even the trencher unit without even a trench. But so we get 6 health, 5 accuracy, 6 health, 5 accuracy, and eventually, if we get to prime rank, you get critical, which just gives you 10% increased critical chance. Critical hits are always awesome, so that's really good. Again, here you get the combat experience that's built into the unit, which is nice, so they will progress pretty nicely. Just have to manage them closely enough so that they're not exposed and don't get overrun or killed. And also, one thing to note, as I've kind of said, or I haven't hinted at yet, but I'll talk about in the tactics screen here next, is how you heal this unit, right? Because it's a mechanical unit, it's not going to be able to heal in some of the more traditional fashions, so you might have to plan around that if you plan to use a bunch of these. So overall, it's an important role, like I've said, in the army composition for Dvar, especially early mid-game. But they're not really required based on how you like to play this faction and some of the other choices that you might make. Positioning is most important. Getting the most out of your movement and abilities. Obviously it's important for every unit, but specifically more so for this unit. Because it can do a bunch of damage and it is potentially vulnerable and it does have the wrinkle of the Agile Overwatch in it. So something to think about. Anyways, that's going to wrap it up for this video. Hopefully you guys found it helpful or interesting. Let me know what you think of the unit in the comments below. Thanks for watching.